Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Chapter 46 Resurrected Ulu. How to Break the Magic. Looking at Gray and Leon kneeling in front of him. A tear also condensed in the corner of Iceman Ulu's eye, across Ice Blue's cheek and dripped to the ground. Ulu squatted down, put his palms on the heads of Gray and Leon, and gently stroked their heads with his hands. Seeing the warm scene in front of them, Urza and Lucy were speechless in shock. Waving the wings behind him, Urza brought Lucy to Luo Gen's side. Looking at Ulu's lifelike face, and Gray and Leon who were crying bitterly. Urza asked Luo Gen curiously, "What's wrong with the two of them? Who is this Ulu?" Luo Gen replied with a smile, "Can't you see that Ulu is the master of Gray and Leon, who sacrificed his life to seal Dai Lionla?" Surprise flashed in everyone's eyes. Since Senior Ulu has already died, why is he resurrected in this form? And call Luo Gen you as the master. Lucy looked in surprise at Ulu whose facial expression was no different from ordinary people, and asked Luo Gen curiously. "My magic can extract the souls of other people, and then endow other objects with their own life, but the target cannot be the one with life. Ulu used super magic absolute freezing to seal Dai Leon back then, and his body and soul were completely turned into this ice cube. Ulu's life has disappeared, but her soul and memory are condensed in this ice cube. After extracting the soul of Del Leon and injecting it into the ice cube, Ulu has become a brand new life created by me." Quote. "It's just that Uru is different from Zeus and Prometheus. Uru has the memories and feelings from before, so he is a different homies." Luo Gen crossed his arms and explained to Lucy beside him with a chuckle. With Luo Gen's explanation, everyone immediately understood. Then Dai Lionla's soul is in Senior Ulu's body, won't there be any problems? Lucy's sudden question made the whole space quiet. Both Leon and Gray raised their heads abruptly, looking at Luo Gen with concern in their eyes. "I was afraid of hearing some unacceptable bad news from Luo Gen." Luo Gen grinned and said, "Don't underestimate me. I don't think the attainment of soul magic belongs to anyone. When I pulled out Leon's soul, I completely wiped out part of its extremely evil soul. The rest is the purest soul body." After Luo Gen's voice fell, Gray and Leon breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing the three Ulu masters and apprentices who were weeping bitterly, Luo Gen and others wisely walked aside and gave the three a chance to tell their hearts. "Leon, is that purple moon in the sky your fault?" After the master and apprentice got along for a while, Gray finally recovered. Pointing to the purple moon in the sky, he asked Leon. Leon nodded and said, "That's right, Ceruti told me that the moon drop can undo the seal of absolute freezing, that's why I came to this island." Ceruti. Who is that? Hearing this strange name, Gray was stunned for a moment, but couldn't remember the name in his mind. "He just went out with Sokka and the others to stop you, didn't you see them?" Seeing Gray's puzzled expression, Leon continued. "You're talking about them." Gray suddenly realized that the few people just now Luo Gen didn't give them a chance to declare themselves, and directly deprived them of their source of magic power. Now they may still be tied outside the temple. Then how to untie this magic circle? Gray temporarily ignored the few people outside, and quickly asked Leon. The magic circle was destroyed the moment Lionla was released. Leon spread his hands and pointed to a dilapidated magic circle not far away. "Then why hasn't that purple moon in the sky disappeared?" Gray frowned, looked at the alluring purple moon above his head and frowned and said. Leon shook his head, saying that he didn't know such a thing either. Gray turned his head and found Luo Gen and others in the distance. "Tell everyone exactly what Leon just said." After learning that the magic circle had been dispelled, but the purple moon in the sky still existed, Lucy immediately became dejected. "Then let's shoot down the moon." Natsu was full of fighting spirit, and the flames surged under the collision of his fists, and he turned around and was about to rush out of the cave. "Stop, Natsu." Looking at Natsu's back, Urza let out a cold drink helplessly. Natsu's footsteps stayed in the air, and he turned around with a dry smile. "Are you a fool? How could the moon be shot down?" Poking Natsu's forehead, Urza's face was covered with black lines. Being reprimanded by Urza, Natsu stood aside dejectedly, and muttered to himself, "Then you don't say think of a way, then you can only shoot down the moon." Leon also looked at Natsu with strange eyes. How could anyone have such an idea? Is this guy an idiot? Go ask Ceruti, he should have a solution. After a moment of silence, Leon followed Ulu to the crowd and said to them, Ceruti is one of the guys who just got tied up by Luo Zhen. Is that the guy you're talking about? At this moment, Luo Zhen, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke, pointing to a short figure not far away. It's him. Leon turned his head and looked in the direction Luo Zhen pointed at. A familiar figure came into view. Hey, Leon, have you betrayed us? Seeing that he had been exposed, Ceruti was no longer hiding, and appeared in front of everyone floating in midair. We are just a cooperative relationship. My goal has been achieved, so let's terminate the cooperative relationship. Leon sneered, looked at Ceruti with folded arms and said with a sneer. TCH, what a hassle. Looking at the wizards in fairy tale, Ceruti frowned deeply. Without looking back, he rushed directly to the outside of the cave. Stop. Seeing that Ceruti wanted to run away, Natsu suddenly jumped up from the ground, his fists were condensed with flames, and he punched Ceruti directly. Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. Jumping to the top of Ceruti, he punched him on the back and knocked him down to the ground heavily. The smoke cleared, and Ceruti stood up with a gloomy expression. He patted the dust off his body. A crystal ball floated in front of him. Chapter 47. Natsu saw that Ceruti was still able to stand up after being punched by him, his brows were raised slightly, and he was ready to move forward with a grin. Raging flames blazed behind Natsu, his fists collided, and he walked towards Ceruti step by step. Fire Dragon's Wing Strike. Natsu was picking up speed, and soon he was running, arms slanted behind him. Go straight to Ceruti's figure. Seeing that Natsu was about to come up to give him a bite, Ceruti's face was frosty, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The next moment, Natsu leapt high, with flames attached to his arms, and went straight towards Ceruti. Just when Natsu's arm was about to hit Ceruti's face, the crystal ball in front of him suddenly moved and blocked Ceruti's body. The crystal ball turned into an afterimage, and appeared in front of Natsu in the blink of an eye. A heavy blow. When Natsu was about to touch Ceruti one step ahead, Natsu was directly knocked out. The crystal ball slowly floated back to Ceruti, looking at everyone with a sneer on his face. Damn it! Natsu in the smoke let out a roar, and then Natsu's figure rushed out of the smoke and went straight to Ceruti. But the next few times, Natsu hit Ceruti and was knocked out by his crystal ball. Ceruti frowned deeply, looking at Natsu who was roaring and rushing towards him again, feeling impatient. Let's get rid of you with one move. The magic circle under the feet condensed, and the magic power continuously poured into the crystal ball. The crystal ball exploded with a bang, and appeared in front of Natsu in an instant. Just when the crystal ball was about to hit Natsu's face, an ice wall suddenly rose in front of Natsu, blocking the crystal ball's attack. The crystal ball was inlaid on the ice wall and was still spinning. The sudden appearance of the ice wall made the rushing Natsu have to stop. Dissatisfied, he turned his head to Gray and shouted, "You ice bastard! Don't interfere in my battle." Gray was full of doubts, he didn't use this magic himself. Glancing at Leon, he saw him looking at him with the same puzzled eyes. At this time, the two reacted and turned their eyes to Ulu behind them. I saw Ulu making the same movements as Gray, and a miniature magic circle was condensed on the fist. Ulu, is that you? Gray looked at Ulu who was using magic in surprise. How about it? Master's strength is not bad. Ulu grinned and wiped the tip of his nose with his finger. Damn it. Ceruti glanced at Ulu bitterly, turned his head and wanted to rush out of the underground cave and leave here. Suddenly, a terrifying breath enveloped it. Ceruti's face instantly became extremely pale, and his whole body seemed to be suppressed by a mountain. With difficulty, he stretched out his palm and grabbed the crystal ball beside him. The Ark of Time, the glory of all gods, suddenly let go of the crystal ball in his hand, letting it float freely into the air. The next moment, a series of bright attacks appeared in the narrow cave, and they went straight to Luo Zhen beside Urza. Ceruti also knew that the only person present with such strength was Luo Zhen. As long as Luo Zhen is dealt with, everyone is no match for him. With a wave of his right hand, Luo Zhen directly blocked the attacks from all directions. With a sudden step on the ground with both feet, the ground collapsed, and Luo Zhen appeared in front of Ceruti in the blink of an eye. Under the terrifying coercion, Ceruti suddenly felt fear in his heart. Horror flashed in his eyes, and he quickly avoided meeting Luo Zhen's gaze. Just now he saw with his own eyes how Luo Zhen extracted the soul of Dai Lion from his body. Seeing Luo Zhen's familiar movements, he thought that Luo Zhen also wanted to extract his own soul. The body is constantly struggling, pushing and beating Luo Zhen with hands and feet. Throwing Ceruti out heavily, he said calmly, how to get rid of the purple moon on Galuna Island. Being thrown to the ground by Luo Zhen, Ceruti covered his neck and coughed twice. The formation of the moondrop is to form a thin film over Galuna Island. The moonlight passes through the thin film to form a purple moon. You only need to smash the thin film covering Galuna Island to relieve the residents of this island. Problem. Ceruti was shocked and panicked. No matter how he faced anyone, he was not as terrified as he was facing the man in front of him. I see, let's go. Luo Zhen nodded, not intending to settle accounts with Ceruti. Originally thought that he was going to die here completely today, but when he suddenly heard Luo Zhen's words, Ceruti suddenly raised his head and looked at Luo Zhen in disbelief. You said let me go. Ceruti looked at Luo Zhen in surprise, and pointed at himself. Some suspect that they have heard wrong. Don't go, right, then don't go. Luo Zhen frowned, and the magic power overflowed Luo Zhen's body, and he was about to step forward to kill Ceruti. Seeing that Luo Zhen really wanted to let him go, Ceruti summoned the crystal ball to his side without the slightest hesitation, and disappeared from everyone's sight after a while. See you next time, Altair. The moment Ceruti left, a familiar voice suddenly reached his ears. Turning his head sharply to take a look at Luo Zhen, his eyes were full of shock. Why would he know his identity? I have never come into contact with this monster in front of me. Looking at the slightly raised corners of Luo Zhen's mouth, Altair was even more puzzled. Is it really okay to let him go? Coming to Luo Zhen's side, Urza looked at Luo Zhen's profile and asked. Luo Zhen shrugged and said with a smile, it's not that we have to kill each other, why do we have to kill each other? Hearing Luo Zhen's words, Urza nodded in agreement. But if those souls who died under Luo Zhen's hands heard this sentence, would they roar at Luo Zhen? Let's get out of here, I already know how to complete the mission on this island. Turning his head, he shouted to Lucy Natsu and others behind him. Everyone hurriedly followed Luo Zhen's back and walked towards the outside of the temple. Gray looked at Ulu, who was also following, and walked beside Ulu without the slightest hesitation. Leon also hesitated for a moment and followed. Leon and several companions were tied up and thrown outside. When Luo Zhen and others appeared, their eyes revealed despair. Now that Luo Zhen and the others have appeared, does it mean that Leon is also defeated by them? But when they saw Leon following closely behind, they were stunned. Puzzled. Chapter 48. Leon, what's going on? Seeing that there were only some signs of fighting on Leon's body, but he didn't look injured, several people couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Leon waved his hand, and remained silent without answering the words of the few people. Several people saw that Leon didn't want to say anything, so they didn't continue to ask. Suddenly, the eyes of several people fell on the woman covered in icy blue. They remembered that there was no such woman when they went in before. Why suddenly more people came out now? And this woman didn't look like a normal person, her whole body was covered in ice blue, as if she was made of ice. And they also saw that Leon and the shirtless man in their group seemed to be very familiar with this woman. The three walked together so closely. The people who were tied up looked at each other, completely puzzled. Luo Zhen lifted the deprived magic power from several people, and felt the magic power gushing out of their bodies again, tears filled their eyes instantly. It's good to have that familiar feeling back. Leon, what's going on with us now? The people whose limbs were untied followed behind Leon, and one of them, a man wearing a dog head mask, approached Leon curiously and asked. Leon was silent for a moment, and said to several people, we lost, Dai Leon's seal was lifted, but he was also killed. As Leon's words fell, the expressions of several people changed suddenly. They are all survivors of the De Leon disaster when they were young. Under the destruction of De Leon, they survived under the protection of their relatives. Dai Leon was killed. Several people were silent, and a line of hot tears flowed from their eyes. Everyone left the temple and went down the mountain. Back in the village, Leon and the others couldn't help being startled when they saw this group of demon-like villagers. Seeing that Leon and the others were taken aback, Gray glanced at him with a sneer and said, "It's all because of the moondrop magic you're doing here that the villagers on the island are cursed." The few people are not bad, and they also showed shame when they heard this. Looking from a distance, there is a thin purple film in the sky. If you don't check carefully in the middle of the night, you can't see the appearance of the film at all. Changing clothes, Tianlin's sword. Since as long as the film is destroyed, the curse on the island can be lifted. Urza immediately switched to the Tianlin armor, and rushed to the sky with two long swords in his hand. With the flying of the sharp blade, dozens of sharp long swords shot straight into the sky, trying to destroy the film in one fell swoop. But the distance of the film is too far. Even if Urza used all his strength, the long sword could not reach the desired height. Unwilling to fall to the ground, Urza continued to switch Kuroba armor. Flapping its wings and flying into the air, an afterimage of black flashed under the dark moon sky. Holding the Kuroba long sword, he shot straight at the membrane in the sky. Standing in the center of the village, Luo Zhen frowned, looking at the ultra-long distance purple film in the sky of Li Tian, feeling a little dignified in his heart. Most of Luo Zhen's abilities are on the ground. It is really difficult for Luo Zhen to rush to such a high distance. After Urza returned to the ground, he shook his head helplessly. "Let me try it." Taking a deep breath, he asked the village chief not far away for a long knife. As Luo Zhen gathered all his strength, he threw the long knife, and a streak of light streaked across the air, shooting straight into the sky like a shooting star. But the difference is that the meteor is from top to bottom, and this kind of streamer is from bottom to top. The speed of the long knife thrown with all his strength in the air directly exceeded the speed of sound, and bursts of sonic booms exploded in the air. The long knife stabbed fiercely on a hard barrier, but failed to penetrate the barrier. The knowledgeable domineering sensed this scene, and Luo Zhen also showed helplessness. Why doesn't Luo Zhen use magic? Suddenly, Lucy on the side spoke. Luo Zhen spread his hands and said helplessly, "Soul magic is useless, and vibration magic is not used. This is an island. If vibration magic is used, it can indeed destroy the film on it, but it may also cause a tsunami, and the port city not far away." Hearing Luo Zhen's words, Lucy couldn't help swallowing. So scary. Taking a deep breath, Luo Zhen summoned Zeus over. Jumping on the back of Zeus, Luo Zhen commanded Zeus to soar into the sky. Zeus's speed was extremely fast, and after a while Lucy and others couldn't see the figures of the two clearly. Coming to the top, Luo Zhen could clearly see the hard barrier above. "Zeus, come closer." Seeing this purple film, Luo Zhen nodded in satisfaction and directed Zeus to approach. Zeus, who received the order, approached and came to the side of the purple film. The moment he approached, Luo Zhen gathered all his strength and slammed his fist heavily on the barrier. In an instant, the barrier shattered, and the sound of the explosion resounded through the sky, echoing in the empty sky. The barrier is shattering, turning into bits of purple starlight and melting into the darkness. Urza and the others on the ground showed joy. Seeing the gradually disappearing purple barrier, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. With the disappearance of the purple barrier, the bright moonlight falls. Bathed in the light of the silver-white moon, the villagers closed their eyes, waiting for their curse to be broken. Suddenly, stretching out his hands, the village head bathed in the moonlight opened his eyes. His figure has not recovered at all, but there is a different look in his eyes. His clansmen also gradually opened their eyes and looked at each other silently. The figure of Luo Zhen returned to the ground and came in front of Urza and others. Urza frowned. Looking at the villagers who had no intention of recovering, he couldn't help asking, "Hasn't the curse been broken yet?" "No, the curse has been lifted." A smile appeared on the ferocious face of the village chief, and he walked in front of Urza and the others. But you. Hearing what the village chief said, Lucy was still a little scared looking at his ferocious face, and stuck her head out from behind Luo Zhen and Urza. "Yes, this is what we are, the curse is not this." The village chief grinned, and such a smile made the already ferocious face even more terrifying. "What?" The words of the village chief shocked everyone except Luo Zhen. Following the village chief's explanation, everyone knew. The villagers on this island are not human beings at all, they are originally a demon-like race. They are able to switch between humans and demons. It's just that they were affected by the drops of the moon, making them forget their identities and their abilities. After seeing his demon face, he thought the island was cursed. Chapter 49. A ship sails on the sea. This is because the village head of the island sent someone to send Luogen and others to leave the island in order to thank Luogen and others. And the person who saw him off happened to be the man who brought Natsu and others to the island, the son of the village chief. At this time, he has recovered the appearance of a human being, propping up the boat and sailing on the sea. Sitting on the deck, the sea breeze gently blows on Luogen's face. Urza sat beside Luogen, hugged Luogen's arm, and leaned his head on Luogen's shoulder. The sea breeze blows Urza Scarlet's long hair, blowing it slightly fluttering. Luogen, after Natsu and the others go back, how will the president punish them? Looking up, looking at Luce's profile with some worry, he asked. Don't worry, the president is a knife-mouthed bean-curd heart, although he said he would punish Natsu and the others, but in the end, big things will be turned into small things, and small things will be turned into small things. Luogen stretched out his hand and gently rubbed Urza Feyred's long hair, and replied with a chuckle. After hearing Luogen's words, Urza also thought of the character of the groom Carlo. Covering his mouth, he laughed lightly, and said with a smile, That's right, the president treats everyone in the guild like his family, even if there is a punishment, it won't be serious. Although Urza said so, Lucy, who was not far away, had already started to get scared. Sitting tremblingly in the corner of Class A, Gray, Leon, and Uru sat in the cabin. The two truthfully told Ulu some things that had happened in these years, as if a child who had been away from home for many years suddenly saw his mother and confided to his mother the bitterness he had suffered in these years. Ulu stretched out his ice-cold blue hands, and gently landed on the heads of Gray and Leon in front of him. With a gentle smile on his face, he said to the two of them with a smile, You brothers must live in harmony, and you will have to walk side by side in the days to come. Gray and Leon glanced at each other, both seeing disdain in each other's eyes. The two snorted coldly and turned their heads away, not looking at each other. Ulu smiled, not paying attention to the funny scene of the two little guys in front of him. After Ulu was resurrected in this way, he was no longer the same as the previous Ulu. Although Ulu now has his own life again, and has all his own memories. But the current Ulu belongs to Luogen. Ulu, come back to Fairy Tale with me, we will always be together. Suddenly, Gray raised his head, looked at Ulu and said expectantly. Hey, what nonsense are you kidding? Ulu must be with me. Without waiting for Ulu to answer, Leon directly interrupted Gray's words, grabbed Gray's collar and shouted loudly. Leon, you wanted to destroy Ulu before, so I won't give Ulu to you. Gray was also not to be outdone, grabbed Leon's clothes and turned back. In the narrow cabin, two people were pushing back and forth. Soon the movement inside the cabin caught the attention of everyone outside. Natsu was lying on the deck passed out with a big lump on his head. Obviously knocked unconscious by someone. Urza came to the cabin with a bad face, looking at Gray and Leon who were wrestling. Stop! Urza shouted loudly, staring at the two with unfriendly eyes. Hearing Urza's voice, Gray subconsciously withdrew his arm. The next moment, a fist hit Gray's face heavily, and Leon looked at Gray who was hit by his punch with disdain. HMPH, can't this work? Leon smiled coldly, looked at the fist marks on Gray's face and raised his head proudly. But before Leon was proud for a while, he suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from behind him. I saw that Urza had already stood behind Leon at some point, and punched Leon heavily on the back of the head. Leon turned around with a cold face, reached out and touched the back of his head. Immediately after rolling his eyes, he fell to the ground and passed out. Fool! Gray rubbed the place where he was punched on his face, and looked at Leon who was knocked out by Urza's punch, with a smirk on his face. Not long after, Leon, who had passed out, woke up slowly. Looking at putting himself on the deck, Gray and Ulu are sitting beside him. Leon rubbed the back of his head, frowning and feeling some pain. Silently glanced at Urza not far away, and when Urza glanced over, Leon quickly looked away. Ulu, let's leave after we get off the boat. The first thing Leon did when he woke up was to talk to Ulu. Uru is going to follow me back to Fairy Tale. Before Ulu could answer, the two started arguing again. If it weren't for Urza's unfriendly gaze scanning the two would probably continue to fight. Suddenly, a calm voice reached the ears of the two. You seem to have forgotten me. Following the sound, Luo Zhen was lying lazily on the deck, raising his hands and smiling at the noisy two. Luo Zhen, what do you mean by what you just said? Gray frowned, suddenly feeling ominous. Ulu will not follow any of you, Uru is mine now. Luo Zhen grinned, looked at the noisy two senior brothers and said. As soon as Luo Zhen's words fell, Leon stood up with an unkind expression. Looking straight at Luo Zhen, he asked word by word, what do you mean by your sentence? If you don't explain clearly, even if I can't beat you, I will fight you. In Leon's heart, Ulu will always be ranked first, and no one is allowed to defile Ulu. Literally, Luo Zhen didn't care about the threat from Irian at all, and sat up with his arms propped up, with a smile on his calm face. Hey, don't be joking. Ulu is alone, how could it belong to you? Leon stood on the deck and shouted at Luo Zhen angrily. Who told you that Ulu is still alone now? Luo Zhen smiled coldly, looking at the icy blue Ulu. Luo Zhen continued. Ulu is now the homies I created, although she has Ulu's soul and memory, but she belongs to me homies. When Luo Zhen's words reached everyone's ears, Urza fell silent. How come? Even if it is Luo Zhen, this is too much. Lucy covered her mouth, looking at the cold smile on Luo Zhen's face. Her face was also a little unsightly. Gray on the side lowered his head, silently looking at the deck. Chapter 50. Asshole. Luo Zhen's words echoed on the vast sea, and the entire deck fell into silence for a moment. Suddenly, Leon stood up and looked at Luo Zhen with sharp eyes. Looking at Luo Zhen with a dark complexion, he put on a fighting stance at the slightest disagreement. I know I'm not your opponent, but I'm willing to give my life for Ulu, don't underestimate me. Leon's body was filled with cold, and a touch of ice under his feet. Blue's magic circle condensed. The next moment, an ice-blue ice-bird condensed aside. Leon's face was as black as iron, and he stared at Luo Zhen with anger in his eyes. The moment Leon shot, Urza immediately stood up, and a long sword appeared in Urza's hand instantly. The point of the sword pointed directly at Leon, looked at him calmly and said, I advise you to calm down. How can you be calm? Hearing Urza's words, Leon's anger surfaced on his face, and he roared at the crowd. When the sword was on the verge of breaking out, Lucy stood silently behind Urza. Regardless, they are members of Fairy Tale. At this time, Leon cast his eyes on Gray, who was silent and kept his head down. Gray, hurry up and express your opinion. Ulu took you in back then, taught you magic unconditionally, and even saved you. With a hideous expression on his face, Leon glared at Gray and roared. Gray stood up slowly, glanced at Leon, who was full of anger, and then looked at Ulu and Luo Zhen, who were silent at the side. Ulu, is what Luo Zhen said true? There was hope in Gray's eyes, hoping to hear words of denial from Ulu's mouth. After a moment of silence, Ulu raised Bing Blue's cheek and looked at Gray and Leon with a complicated expression. Nodding his head, Ulu calmly said, yes, my life already belongs to the master. As Ulu's voice fell, the entire deck suddenly fell silent. Leon slipped and knelt on the ground in disbelief, staring blankly at Ulu's figure. Gray was also uncomfortable, with 2 lines of hot tears streaming down his face, his head lowered and his whole body trembling constantly. As the role of the mother of the two, Ulu still felt a little uncomfortable seeing the two of them showing this appearance, even though they had already lost their heart. Gray, Leon, don't feel sorry for me, I did it myself. With a smile on his face, Ulu walked up to the two of them and poured them into his arms. In Ulu's arms, Gray and Leon burst into tears instantly, like children who have been wronged and thrown into their mother's arms to seek comfort. Urza withdrew the long sword in his hand, looked at the calm Luo Zhen, and then at the 3 people hugging each other. He came to Luo Zhen with a complicated expression, just about to say something. Luo Zhen glanced at Urza with a complicated expression, and then said, I really don't understand why you are so far apart. Although Ulu is a homies created by me, she still has her own memories and life. I didn't say to erase Ulu's memory, why do you want to look like you will never see him again? After Luo Zhen's words fell, the two brothers Gray, who were still crying, raised their heads instantly and looked at Luo Zhen in a daze. Especially you, Gray. Sorcerers who also belong to fairy tale, you and Ulu can see each other without looking up, why are you so pretentious? A burst of scolding from Luo Zhen woke Gray up. Gray, who was suddenly awakened, also reacted. Luo Zhen is a mage from fairy tale, and so is himself. That Ulu is Luo Zhen's homies, isn't that also the mage of fairy tale? After reacting, Gray stood up excitedly, threw himself in front of Luo Zhen and gave Luo Zhen a big hug. Go away, go away. Gray hugged Luo Zhen tightly, which made Luo Zhen feel a chill. Pushing Gray aside, Luo Zhen patted his clothes in disgust. Gray didn't care, and looked at Ulu beside him with a smile. But Leon fell silent, looked at Ulu at the side, and then at Luo Zhen and others. Gritting his teeth, Leon stared at Luo Zhen and said, I want to join fairy tale too. Then you have to find our president, it's useless to find me. Luo Zhen shrugged, but did not explicitly reject Leon. In this way, the ship docked quickly, and everyone embarked on the journey back to Magnolia. Because Leon decided to join fairy tale, his companions decided to follow Leon after careful consideration. Amidst Natsu's protest, everyone got on the train. It didn't take long to get back to Magnolia. As soon as she stepped out of the station, Lucy fell silent. Some feared how Carlo would punish him if he returned to the guild. He looked at Urza beside him for help, but Urza ignored him. Lucy lowered her head helplessly and followed behind the crowd. Back at the guild, everyone saw the group of people who came back, and the whole guild fell silent. When Luo Zhen and Urza left to pursue Natsu and others, the fact that Natsu secretly took the S-level entrustment also spread in the guild. Everyone looked at Natsu and Lucy with complicated expressions. Directly in front of him, Ma Karloff was crossing his arms, looking at Natsu and Lucy who came back with a livid face. You three idiots. After a long silence, Ma Karloff suddenly jumped up and jumped up. A hard punch landed on Natsu's head. Is the S-level entrustment as simple as you think it is? Carlo the horse yelled at the three of them loudly. Natsu happy and Lucy bowed their heads obediently, and stood aside to listen to Carlo the horse's reprimand. Breathing out angrily, Ma Karloff looked helplessly at the two people and the cat in front of him. Beside the horseman Carlos, Mirajan suddenly stood up. There was no smile on her gentle face. Slowly walked up to Natsu. Suddenly he stretched out his hand and slapped Natsu on the face. The crisp voice echoed in the guild, and everyone watched this scene dumbfounded. That gentle Mirajan actually hit someone. After Mirajan's personality changed drastically, everyone seemed to have forgotten what kind of person Mirajan was. The appearance of Mirajan's little sister, the irascible girl, seems to have been replaced by this gentle Mirajan. Now Mirajan's face is livid, standing straight in front of Natsu and the others. Natsu, who was slapped by Mirajan, was stunned. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.